With little room to move and little time to sell it,
An election winner?
Wait and see.
Josh Frydenberg's manoeuvred himself closer than anyone towards the surplus that's eluded 4 treasurers before him.
So this man here, with all the focus being put towards him, is Josh Frydenberg. He's a federal treasurer. A federal treasurer literally just looks after the money of the government. So every May, he takes a forecast, meaning an estimate of all the revenues, and then, based on that, determine where they're going to spend the money for the next year in order to benefit Australians and our economy as a whole. This is where the environment gets some funding, education gets funding, hospitals get funding, public roads and transportation, all this sort of stuff. All these decisions are generally made in May. Sometimes the government can make a miniature budget released away from May, just like what we've had occur with the COVID-19 crisis. Again, this is all done with the hopes of keeping our economic prosperity and keeping everyone happy and loving life.
First budget, yeah.
Well, Australia is back in the black.
All going to plan, the books will be out of the red and back in the black in 15 months' time. By 7.1 billion in 2020, 11 the year after, climbing to almost 18 billion, before trailing off to 9.
So yeah, you've already heard that statement, back in black, being thrown around. This pretty much means that they're spending less than they're receiving. In other words, they have money left in the bank account after all the spending has occurred. So when we have money left over after all the spending occurs, we call this a surplus. While if we have less money in our bank account after all the spending occurs, we call that a deficit. If you have a deficit that keeps occurring over a long period of time and don't have a bank account to support it, the government will generally borrow money in order to continue funding its expenses. So as of March 2020, the government currently owes about $573.1 billion. And the reason why this number is so large is because if you look at this diagram above you right now, you can see that we've run budget deficit after budget deficit since 2009 with the $900 stimulus package from Kevin Rudd during the GFC crisis. So we haven't had a budget surplus since 2007 under the Peter Costello, John Howard government. And during their time, since 1999, they managed to run consecutive amounts of budget surpluses. So by the time 2006 came along, the government actually owed no money to anyone else. And the next 2 budget surpluses actually went into the government's bank account, saving it for a rainy day. So yeah, after 11 years of budget deficits, we owe about $571 billion. So the information on your screen now is a bit outdated. For the 2019-20 budget, they were expecting a $7.1 billion surplus. But you got to remember, these budget outcomes are based on estimates. They're all forecasts. Just like the weather reports, sometimes what they state is going to happen doesn't necessarily mean it will happen. And the reason why we're not going to have a $7.1 billion surplus is because of the COVID-19 crisis that occurred during March. The government pumped in an extra $200 billion into the economy to keep us all living our best lives possible. And those numbers haven't been added to the forecast, so expect a budget deficit in excess of possibly $200 billion.
Spending less than it earns over a decade is meant to draw debt down from $500 billion and wipe it out completely over a decade. They're long-term projections for a budget that strives to tackle short-term problems, and very quickly. The return of tax relief to taxpayers.
What they mean here is taxing people less so they have more money to spend to buy the things that they want.
And, if it works politically, the return of the Morrison government next month.
Yeah, during this time last year, an election was coming up, so the Liberal government possibly spent more money than they should have on things that don't necessarily mean the best for society. Some of their decisions might have been just politically motivated to ensure that they were in power the next 3 years. But through our class, you're going to start reviewing all the budget policies that they produced, and then you could decide for yourself whether or not this was all political or in the best interest of Australians.
It's an expensive business coming in 2 steps. Almost immediately in July, low and middle income earners not only get the $530 tax offset promised last year, it'll now be doubled, up to $1,080 for eligible singles, $2,100 for families with 2 incomes. 4.5 million people will be due those full amounts within weeks.
I just have to add here that I received that $1,080, and it was pretty much similar to Kevin Rudd's $900 stimulus package. It was money just given to us, and we got to spend it how we want, where we wanted it, in order to improve our lifestyles.
The biggest tax cuts since the Howard government.
Well, this will grow the economy.
Later, 2 elections away, comes the second stage. The 32.5-cent tax rate goes and is replaced by a 30-cent rate, leaving Australia's taxpayers spread across 3 brackets. Almost a quarter on less than $45,000 a year, paying 19 cents in the dollar. 70% earning between $45,000 and $200,000 on the 30-cent rate. And the 6% earning above that, paying marginal tax at 45 cents in the dollar. Total cost, $158 billion over 10 years.
All you need to know is that they're removing one tax bracket, which overall reduces the amount of tax every Australian pays.
Tax relief now, and even the expensive bits delivered later in 2024, sounds like the bounty of an economy and a budget doing well. But it doesn't exactly work like that in the years ahead. It's also a kind of pump priming insurance against economic slowdown. And with house prices faltering or full on falling, there are risks there.
Okay, Mr. Big Man with his big words, let's break down what the hell just happened there. Okay, so last year the economy wasn't looking too good. People have already reduced their amount of spending and started increasing their savings accounts because they were thinking that their jobs might be gone or they'll have reduced hours in the future. So these budget changes were meant to be like a steroid to get people spending money in the economy again. That's all that man was trying to say.
The idea is to get people spending again, and from tonight there's $400 million worth of incentives for business to do that. Firms turning over up to $50 million a year can buy tools and equipment and gain an instant tax write-off for any asset worth up to $30,000.
What this means is that businesses can buy assets that are worth up to $30,000 and claim that on tax and get some money back on it. Effectively, businesses get a discount on purchasing assets which help improve their business. It could be as simple as buying new phones and laptops to make it easier to do transactions with customers, buying new vehicles so you can get to point A to point B in your construction job easier, faster, more effectively, all these sort of things. All of this is meant to improve the productivity of businesses, and if they're more productive, they can produce more things at a smaller time frame. If they can produce more in a small time frame, that means they can make more profits overall during the same period of time. This will be beneficial for the government because they'll be able to collect more tax revenue from those increased profits, and at the same time consumers will have more products available to them and at a cheaper price. So in the end, consumers, businesses and the government wins by putting this policy into action.
After the struggles of the Turnbull government, there's nothing new for big business tonight, except an extra pot of money for the tax office to go after them in the continuing crackdown on corporate tax avoidance.
So big businesses are notorious for tax avoidance, meaning that they're finding ways not to pay taxes that are actually owed to the government. So yeah, the government's spending $1 billion to set up a special team in order to recover money that's owed to them from these big corporations.
And there's the vast network of road and rail infrastructure projects, much of it already flagged.
There'll be cranes, there'll be hard hats, there'll be heavy machinery across the country.
Tax cutting is expensive business for the budget, which means this one's relatively narrow in where it casts its money. Even so, it does deliver what's left to causes far and wide. $500 million for job skills, 80,000 apprenticeships and bonuses for employers who hire them. $528 million over 5 years for the Royal Commission to delve into abuse of the disabled. A long-term emergency response fund will be set up to help cover the costs of drought and flood on the land. Long frozen Medicare payments for GP services will thaw and rise again from July. And the ABC gets $43 million. Mostly to maintain regional news services. This budget's designed to win friends and offend few. Whether it achieves that objective will mostly be measured at the election. Only the energy assistance payments for pensioners and welfare recipients will be treated as a priority to pass into law on the one day left for Parliament to do that, which is tomorrow. The rest is up to voters at the ballot box in May.
Alright, so the video has just shown you all the different policies that the government is going to put into place in order to make our economy great again. Now, your job for Benchmark 2 is pretty much analyze all these policies and nitpick them. Find out what's good about them, what's bad about them, and come up with an overall conclusion of why you think these policies are great or not great for the living standards of all Australians. Good luck and have fun.